An eerie fog rolling into Soldier Field. Hundreds of thousands of bats living inside a football stadium. And a player taking his glove off mid-game, only to discover that a piece of his finger was gone. What's going on, everybody? Halloween is fast approaching. This is a time of year full of scares and spooks, and if you're a fan like me, bad quarterback play. Too bad Joe Flacco got traded to perhaps the only team that has a worse O-line than the Browns right now. In the spirit of this holiday, I thought we'd take a look at some of the most frightening and unsettling stories related to football, ranging from scary mascot tales to haunted stadiums. So go ahead and grab your snacks for this one. I'm rocking with Chomps. To kick us off, I first wanted to do something fun related to NFL player names. Here's a most frightening football lineup. At quarterback, John Skelton. Behind him in the backfield, Frank Gore. Out at wide receiver, Jermaine Kearse, Webster Slaughter, and Dick Witcher. And at tight end, DeAndre Goolsby and Boo Williams. On the defensive line, you have Javon Hargrave, Cedric Killings, Jack Youngblood, and Michael Myers. At linebacker, Frank Zombo and TJ Slaughter. And finally, at cornerback, DJ Killings and Darius Slay. Having a spooky sounding name is one thing, but to actually look scary, that's a whole nother beast. And no one in the history of the NFL has quite looked as terrifying as Jack Lambert. Nicknamed Dracula in Cleats, Jack Lambert was missing his front teeth, which gave him one of the most iconic looks in NFL history.
Interference! Oh, you asshole!
It was straight nightmare fuel for opposing quarterbacks, and he honestly may be more terrifying to look at than Freddy Krueger.
Please, God. This is God.
Now, Halloween is a big snack holiday, which makes today's video sponsor, Chomps, the perfect thing to chow down on. I love Chomps because it's high quality protein, perfect for grabbing something on the go when you're headed out the door, or if you're settling down and watching a horror movie during Halloween. Honestly, the original flavor is just so good to me. I enjoy it a lot. But to be honest, I've enjoyed a lot of their flavors. And if you've had them, let me know which one's your favorite down below. And if you're wondering what all the hype's about, well, you gotta click the link in the description to try some yourself. And if you do, you'll have to let me know what you think. Shout out to Chomps for sponsoring today's video. Now, seeing a crazy looking guy with no teeth in a football game like Jack Lambert would be terrifying. But imagine seeing a guy lose his finger in the middle of a game. That's just what happened to Rashad Johnson back in 2013. It happened on this play. And when you watch it, it looks like nothing unusual takes place. But disaster struck on the sidelines when the medical staff got his glove off and they all noticed that the tip of his middle finger was completely severed. They had thrown his glove in the trash, and when they pulled it out, they found his severed fingertip. Johnson eventually returned to play, and he was even better once he returned. And now he forever shares a bond with Ronnie Lott. Lott famously had his fingertip amputated due to an in-game incident, and he later returned to playing again. Now, some of the most unsettling things that happen in games don't really happen on the field with the players, but rather what happens in the crowd. And one time in 1979 during a Seahawks game, one fan set off an explosive device.
To a 48-yard pass. An explosive device just went off on the sidelines to the right of the New Orleans bench.
The craziest part about this is that everyone was so nonchalant around him, and ultimately it was just a weird one-time moment. That was odd, but what's much scarier is when a large group of people turn into a complete mob, and anything goes in that sort of situation. When fans turn against the team, or worse, the officials, and they happen to have something in their hand, disaster can happen. There was the infamous snowball game, where basically snowballs, and in some cases ice balls, were thrown and even did some damage.
I don't know what the hell's in there, but it's weird and pissed off.
Mac wants the flamethrower.
In 2001, the infamous Bottlegate moment happened where unruly fans threw beer bottles down on the field at the refs. This also did damage. there's hardly anything you can do to gain control as the stadium's police. Luckily, these situations didn't go worse, but every time you start hearing loud boos at a game, you're just moments away from anarchy. Now, it's one thing when the crowd is doing things from the stands. It's a whole nother thing when they rush the field. Storming the field is one of the more chaotic traditions mostly linked to college football, although it has happened in the NFL, just not in a long time. Throughout the history of storming the field, there has been some crazy and creepy things that have happened, and we'll start with the dangerous side of things. Tearing down the goalposts is one of the most common things that happen when fans storm the field. Unfortunately, amongst all the excitement, some bad things have happened over the years. Many lawsuits have been filed and laws created around storming the field due to serious problems arising. In 1959, a 14-year-old girl was hit in the head while the posts were falling, and she died of her injuries the following day. In 1983, an 18-year-old Harvard student was left in critical condition after getting hit in the head with the posts. In 1985, the Patriots clinched a playoff berth versus the Bengals, and fans carried the goalposts outside of the stadium and accidentally ran into a high-voltage power line, which seriously injured some guy.
Alex, get away from there!
He eventually sued and settled for $4.5 million against the security company from that game. In 1998, an Oregon State fan suffered a fractured skull and bleeding in her brain. In 2001, a Ball State student was rendered a paraplegic after the post landed on his back. What's wild about this one was that the school promoted the students to take down the posts, flashing a message on the scoreboard after the game saying, quote, "The goalposts look lonely." I made a video about storming the field a few years ago, and this is the current pinned comment from that video. Being right next to the post coming down was scary, but I didn't see anyone get hurt until people started moving the posts, and these girls, maybe a half dozen of them, were being crushed/trampled by the body weight of 20 people trying to leave the stadium. It was genuinely terrifying watching them screaming and crying under the pile. Now, beyond the dangerous side of it, there has been some creepy things that have taken place. Most notably, in 2013 during the Alabama-Auburn Iron Bowl, there was a fan who, when they rushed the field, had spread cremated remains on the field. And here's a comment from a stadium official that makes it worse. Quote, "It happens a lot more than you think. People want their final resting place to be Jordan-Hare Stadium." Apparently, this is an Iron Bowl tradition because 2 years later, something similar took place. One reporter captured another man who spread cremated remains on the field, and before spreading them, the man holding the remains in the Ziploc bag told the reporter, quote, "These are my grandfather's ashes, and I'm going to dump them on the field." Now, moving beyond what happens inside the stadiums themselves can provide some creepy vibes. In Tennessee at Neyland Stadium, it used to be home to over 1,000 skeletons. They were stored in rooms inside the stadium that used to serve as the players' dorms, but were turned into the anthropology department. The specific purpose of this place was to study how they decompose. And in 2017, they officially moved to an off-site location. It's pretty wild to think that there was decomposing bodies in that stadium at one point, but there's no more skeletons as far as I know in Neyland Stadium. On the paranormal side of things, there is some stadiums and places in college football that people claim to be haunted. And maybe the best example of this is Camp Randall in Wisconsin. Prior to the stadium construction in 1989, Camp Randall was a 53-acre property that had been used during the Civil War as a Confederate prison. This at one point housed 1,400 captured Confederate soldiers, and some 140 died while they were there. After the stadium was built, tailgaters have described seeing spirits ahead of games, and they reportedly are usually seen wearing their uniforms, as well as various slings and bandages, and wandering in and out of the stadium, seemingly oblivious to the thousands of rowdy fans. Mike Huberty, the founder of American Ghost Walks, said that this could potentially be explained by the stone tape theory, not to be confused with the stoned ape theory. The stone tape theory speculates that mental impressions during severe traumatic events are preserved into the energy of a place and display as almost a residual recording, and are not spirits doomed to spend eternity stuck in one place.
They want me to drink another whiskey, dude.
I want to drink that right now.
That would be your third shot.
It feels good.
Now, paranormal activity can be unnerving. But what's much more scary is when you build a football stadium on top of a fault line. Cal's football stadium was built on top of the Hayward Fault, which scientists consider to be a very dangerous fault line, and not only that, it's overdue. Bob Milano Jr., the university's former assistant athletic director of capital programs, said, quote, "The fault runs on a diagonal right across the field. Here's an animation to give an idea of what could happen if the fault went off." Luckily, they did a stadium renovation back in 2012 that cost over $300 million. So now the stadium is considered a seismically safe structure, and their new field features a line where the fault actually is. Over at Texas A&M Stadium, they are considered a bat-friendly zone because at one point, their stadium was home to hundreds of thousands of bats. Here's an excerpt from an ESPN article about the bats. Quote, "The Mexican free-tailed bats, which are the official flying mammal of Texas, were vigilant in controlling insects, with the population eating somewhere between 50 million to 150 million insects at night. The large population of bats was difficult to clean up after though, with bat guano, I think that's how it's pronounced, appearing throughout the stadium and requiring an estimated $150,000 per year in cleanup costs." About a decade ago, Kyle Field underwent a massive renovation, which kicked out all the bats and made it really hard for them to get back in. So nowadays, there's hardly any bats that are seen inside the stadium, although it's still possible. But one of the side effects of them kicking out these bats was those bats took shelter on other buildings across campus, including dorms and the campus natatorium. This led to a temporary shutdown in the spring of 2015 because too many bats entered those spaces. In the history of football, animals have always played a role, whether it was intentional like mascots or unintentional like those bats. Other examples of these unintentional animals include seeing black cats, jackrabbits, and possums running across the field and in the stands. These occurrences are mostly exciting to the fans who witness them. However, on September 11th, 2021, a cat was seen dangling from the upper deck of Hard Rock Stadium during a Miami Hurricanes home game. It eventually fell, and its fall was broken by people holding an American flag. And luckily, the cat ended up being okay. But unlike that cat, there was once a parrot in the Saints locker room that wasn't so fortunate. Former Saints quarterback Archie Manning once told a story about a teammate who brought in a pet parrot into the team's locker room. Basically, this teammate of his was signed the day before the game.
Beautiful parrot. And, well, he dropped the first punt, and they never put him back in. When we went back in the dressing room after the game was over, that parrot was dead.
Nobody knows what happened to that parrot, unfortunately. But like I was saying, animals have always played a role in football, both intentionally and unintentionally. And speaking of the intentional side of things, animals have always played a role in the form of a mascot. We have seen both costume figured and actual live animals. And for the costumed ones, there is a fair share of creepy looking mascots. And every once in a blue moon, they get into a fight or shoot a cannon in the wrong direction. But these aren't exactly all that unsettling. The real live animals are the ones who have cause for concern. Having a longhorn bull that weighs somewhere in the ballpark of 1,500 to 2,000 pounds around a bunch of people, some of whom are wearing red, including a tiny bulldog. Talk about a pending disaster.
Oh my lord! Can live television get better than that? No!
Everyone involved in this scene is lucky that that longhorn was more so just curious as to what was going on rather than being pissed off and ready to cause mayhem. That bulldog escaped tragedy, but unfortunately in 1934, there was another mascot that wasn't so lucky. During a game between SMU and Fordham, or Fordham, I don't know how it's pronounced, the Ram got too close to the Mustang, and the Mustang kicked the Ram so hard that it died instantly. For the mascots that run around the field, it's always crossed my mind, what if they break free? It's never really happened in some devastating way according to my research. The closest example I could even find was one incident in 1985 that still has Oklahoma Sooner fans feeling unsettled, if you will. The Sooners were attempting to win the Orange Bowl, which meant that they would have been the national champions. In the second half, they looked to take a 3-point lead with a short field goal, and they did make the kick, but it was called back due to a series of penalties. There was an illegal procedure which reset the down. and also a 15-yard penalty on their mascot because it accidentally got too close to the opponent's sideline and it stopped, creating a scene. The Sooners got their next attempt blocked, and eventually they went on to lose that game. Now, like I've said, there's never really been an example of a mascot who broke free of its restraints and just started running around the field, as far as I can find, unless you count that bull from that game against Georgia. But in 1981, there was some pranksters who broke into LSU's facility and they found the team's mascot, Mike the Tiger, an actual live tiger. These kids cut the locks on Mike's cage, and Mike roamed around campus for the next few hours, eventually trapping himself in the track stadium. It's crazy. I just imagine the track team going out for practice that day, about to start their warm-up, only to see a tiger roaming around. That would be terrifying. Too bad even their fastest sprinters couldn't escape, because tigers run at 30 to 40 miles an hour. Of course, this didn't actually happen. The tiger caretakers found him before he did any damage to anyone, and they used 3 tranquilizer shots on him to put him to sleep and get him back in his cage. Okay, so we've talked a lot about things outside of the actual game of football. Talking about the game itself, I don't know if there's too much that you could classify as unsettling outside of maybe a gruesome injury like what we saw with Tyreek Hill, or nearly seeing a player die like we saw with Damar Hamlin, which luckily he survived and he came back and started playing again. But I guess the one thing that you could say is unsettling was the Fog Bowl. During a playoff game between the Bears and Eagles in 1988, a thick fog rolled in that made it impossible to see what was going on. Also, it happened on a full moon. The most unsettling part would have been for quarterback Randall Cunningham. He'd be looking at the intimidating, beady eyes of Mike Singletary. Then all of a sudden, Singletary would take a few steps back and disappear. As creepy as this fog was, it did take place in January. As far as Halloween games itself, there really hasn't been anything too creepy or crazy, although it is cool to see all the players dress up and fans dress up in the crowd. However, this wouldn't be a KTO video without a highlight at the end. So to end this video, I'm going to show you a crazy game highlight where we have one of the rarest things that's ever happened in football, a game ending on a walk-off safety, which happened in 2013 on Halloween night.
3rd down and 10, Dalton in his own end zone, and down he goes into the safety. Ball game